Yes, people, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to KGX to the Z TV. Here with a quick video today. We've got to talk about none other than the man on the screen, one Alexander Isak, because it is all popping off in Newcastle right now. Late too. It's currently 8:15 p.m. on the East Coast of the United States here. So it's got to be at least well past midnight over there in the UK, probably 1, 2 in the morning. Um, and updates keep coming out. Craig Hope, the man who is bringing no hope to this situation, but is supplying us with a lot of really, really good news when it comes to this whole situation. And this situation has just been, it's been carrying on for so long that much like the Mbappe saga last year or 2 years ago, 2 summers ago, you're just like, when is this going to end? When is it going to end? When is he going to become a Liverpool player? When is he going to get his move? But Newcastle with the not so fast statement tonight. But before we get into that, make sure you guys hit that like, hit that subscribe, turn those notifications on. Like I mentioned before in some of my previous videos, we are, and when I say we, it's me, because it's just me doing all this stuff for this particular channel. But we are trying to give you more content more frequently. Try to collab with some folks on here, some Chelsea content creators across the globe, not just in the U.S. but also overseas, to give you guys the my honest opinion on not only all things Chelsea but the world of boxing. I'm a huge boxing fan. We got the Canelo fight coming up soon with Bud, as well as things that pop up like this that sort of capture the media's attention and capture everyone's sort of imagination. So let's get into it, man. So we'll talk a little bit about, just to set a little bit of the backstory before we read this particular statement. We'll go ahead. We'll take this off the screen real quick. But see the dog there chilling in the back, sleeping. Tough day at work covering the Isak situation, huh, boy? Yeah, that's what I thought. But no, in all seriousness, though, Liverpool's interest in Alexander Isak has been well known for quite some time. Even dating back to last summer, there were rumors of Isak probably just having one more year at Newcastle and then getting his move. Whether that was to Liverpool at that time, Arsenal were also rumored, right? You can't help but um, sort of make the comparisons to Thierry Henry, both in the way he plays, obviously not the TT's level, but also the number, the 14, his mannerisms on the pitch and things like that. Very, very Thierry Henry-esque when it comes to that particular regard. And he's not quietly, but he's built up a nice little resume here in England after what was a slow start. He came from Sociedad. There were a lot of concerns. Was he really an out-and-out striker? A lot of the things that folks have been saying about Nico Jackson in terms of him being raw, is he really an out-and-out striker, were some of the same conversations that we had about Alexander Isak before he came to Newcastle. But he's righted a lot of those wrongs, and he has really cemented himself as, if not the best, the most complete striker that we have in the league. I'm still of the opinion that a man that puts the ball in the back of the net like Erling Haaland, and he had a brace on the weekend, I want my striker to score goals. All the link-up play, all the dribbling, all the shot creation and chance creation for other players is nice. But at the end of the day, strikers are judged by goals. Get that G&A bullshit out of here. Goals is what I want my striker to do. And over the last couple of years, Isak has stayed relatively injury-free, so he's put some of those injury concerns behind him, and he's bagged goals. So what can you say? Credit to him. He, along the way, helped Newcastle this year win the League Cup. First trophy that they've had in, I want to say, like 40, 50, 60 years maybe. So in that regard, if he were to leave Newcastle, he would be leaving under normal circumstances, having brought a trophy, probably commanding a really, really large fee. He would have been leaving Newcastle and Newcastle fans in a good light. But instead, things have gotten really ugly, and to the point where it's almost the point of no return. Right now, they're at a stalemate. So we'll get into it a little bit more. Um, but that's sort of what built up to this. Fast forward to this summer, Liverpool again sniffing around. They seem to be the only ones interested. Maybe it's a price thing. Maybe it's Isak telling um, the Liverpool Fenway group that Liverpool was his only destination. We don't know, right? Just like the Gyökeres situation, there's a lot of promises. There's a lot of behind the scenes conversations going on between clubs, agents, clubs, and players, and things like that. So you don't really know the true story. And even if the true story actually does come out, whose side are you going to believe? Are you going to believe the Isak side? You're going to believe the Newcastle side, or are you going to believe the Liverpool side, who's Liverpool's just sitting in the background now, just waiting. They tabled an offer. They put together a $110 million package that Newcastle immediately rejected. So you know that Liverpool, the intent is there. Liverpool maybe even looking at it from the situation of, in the standpoint of, let's get a jump on this in case there are other suitors next year. Maybe Barcelona scrapes up some cash. Maybe Real Madrid says, you know what, this two striker situation with Mbappe and Vinny up top isn't working. Maybe we need to mix it up. They love a Galactico. He's been in Spain before. Whether or not he would want to go back to Spain is a different story. But when Real Madrid comes calling, and this is a huge if, very hard for a lot of players to turn down, right? We've seen them take away the likes of Hazard. We've seen them take away the likes of Thibaut Courtois, Trent Alexander-Arnold. So whatever team you support, if your team is not Real Madrid or Barcelona, then just know that they can come in at any time, turn your player's head, table an offer, potentially wait them out for their contract, and get that player in through the door. But that was the offer that was set forth by Newcastle. I'm sorry, by Liverpool to Newcastle, that was rejected. And just an odd situation, because what sort of complicated it all, and let me know in the comments what you think about this particular aspect of it. But the more I look at it, the more it seems like Liverpool, at the start of the summer, Newcastle had expressed a lot of interest in Hugo Ekitike. They had agreed personal terms, or were close to agreeing personal terms. The money was not an issue. They could have put the money up. So everyone pretty much thought that before Ekitike ultimately signed with Liverpool, that the situation was Ekitike to Newcastle, Isak to Liverpool, Sesko and Gyökeres to either United or Arsenal, which we ultimately ended up knowing where they're going now, because hindsight's a beautiful thing, right? So you've got Gyökeres at Arsenal, you've got Sesko at Man United, and that was sort of the high level striker roundtable and dominoes that were looking most likely to fall, right? Like I mentioned before, Gyökeres was sort of the initial sticky situation, with Isak situation kind of hanging in there in the end. Then you had bit part, I'll say outside of that top main group, if you had to go down one more level, the likes of Nico Jackson, who was looking to be on the move and things like that. So for the first time in a long time, and we talk about this all the time about how the game's fallen off and how strikers aren't what they used to be. But this summer, there were more strikers on the market than I can remember in quite some time. So definitely, a little bit of that round table, a little bit of those dominoes needed to fall. And once they did started falling, it sort of confused things, and it sort of irked this whole Liverpool and Isak situation, because ultimately, and this is just my opinion, and chat, let me know what you think about this, but by Liverpool essentially going out and getting Newcastle's number one target in Ekitike, and we know that they were interested in Delap. They got turned down by Delap. We know they were interested in Sesko and ultimately got turned down by Sesko. We know Newcastle got turned down by a lot of players this summer. But Ekitike seemed to be open to the move. Frankfurt was okay with the package that Newcastle put together. So logically, what I thought was Ekitike to Newcastle. Newcastle now has the striker replacement for Isak. They can go out and they can let Isak go to Liverpool, and it's all one big happy EPL family. But by Liverpool going out and gazumping Newcastle to Ekitike, Newcastle and PIF, I feel like they sat back a little bit and said, "Yo, this isn't right. You want us to sell you guys our best player, our marquee player, our marquee striker, but yet you went out and already took our replacement." Personally, I think that sort of soured the relationship a little bit between Newcastle and Liverpool, and we've known that those two have had communications before because Newcastle or Liverpool was in for Anthony Gordon last year. Anthony Gordon, who had wanted to, or I guess he grew up a Liverpool fan, had wanted to join Liverpool after he left Everton, and even before he got to Newcastle. But then again, so most folks thought that with Diaz going and Diaz being on the rumor to be out last year, that Gordon was going to go there. So long story short, there's definitely some sort of relationship that Newcastle and Liverpool have when it comes to transfers and it comes to players and things like that. But I really, really think that Ekitike to Liverpool transfer, which looks like a really good signing because Ekitike has hit the ground running, goals in the Community Shield, a nice goal in their opener versus Bournemouth, and just looks like a really, really talented player. Someone that I was high on, and I wouldn't have minded if we would have pursued him. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy with Delap. I'm happy with João Pedro, but at the time when we were mostly linked with Ekitike, because Pedro kind of came out of nowhere, I liked what I had seen from him. I liked his profile. I liked his upbringing there at PSG. So what kind of technical base that he had. But yeah, that's just, I feel like that sort of threw a wrench into everything, because if you want a team to sell you their best player, don't go out and buy that team's replacement. That is not going to help the relationship. That is not going to get this over the line. And what we've seen now is we've seen just a situation where everything is just up in smoke. Newcastle and Isak are pointing fingers, and there's just a lot of just animosity and a lot of just bad blood between the two. So fast forward to today, nothing much has changed. Liverpool didn't table a second bid. Everything, game week 1 has come and gone. What makes it even more interesting and throws another wrench into it is the fact that Liverpool traveled to St. James's Park this week. So in my mind, I always thought that if this transfer were to happen, it was never going to happen this week. It was going to always be after the Liverpool-Newcastle game, because the last thing Newcastle fans wanted to see is they show up and Isak is sitting in the stands because he's not registered yet, or he's not up to fitness yet, sitting in the Liverpool section of the stands with all of their players that aren't particularly injured, or they're some of their extended coaches and families and wags and all that good stuff. So it just muddied everything, made everything a messy little soap opera. And now we get the news, and let me zoom in a little bit. The news today about Alexander Isak dropping this statement. Now, I don't know. I'll be 100% honest with you, folks. I don't know where he dropped this statement, but it looks like it's a story on social media that he posted. So maybe he posted it to his IG. Maybe he posted it on TikTok. But we'll read it for those folks that might be listening to just the audio. It says, "I'm proud to be recognized by my fellow professionals with a place in the PFA Premier League Team of the Season for 2024-25. So that the PFA awards Ward tonight, he was awarded, justly so, a position in there. I think Salah took home the top player honors. But get back to a statement. First and foremost, I want to thank my teammates and everyone at Newcastle United who's supported me along the way. I'm not at the ceremony tonight with everything going on. It didn't feel right to be there. I've kept quiet for a long time while others have spoken. The silence has allowed people to even has allowed people to push their own version of events, even though they know it doesn't reflect what was really said and agreed behind closed doors. The reality, and listen again to this part, the reality is that promises were made and the club has known my position for a long time. To now act as if these issues are only emerging is misleading. When promises are broken and trust is lost, the relationship can't continue. That's where things are for me right now, and why change is in the best interest of everyone, not just myself. Signed, Alexander Isak. Those last two paragraphs, very, very damning, right? Very, very strong statements. The reality is when promises are broken and trust is lost. To me, that sounds like a relationship that cannot be repaired. And look, we get it. Newcastle could offer Isak 300K a week, and maybe Isak would go ahead and take that, and all would be forgiven until next year. But those are some very, very strong statements and very, very strong accusations. And I say accusations because, again, we don't know what side is right. We don't know who's telling the truth, who's not telling the truth. Maybe the truth is somewhere 50-50 in between. But one thing is clear, and this made itself very, very evident during the Gyökeres situation when he was trying to get out of his Sporting deal. These gentlemen agreements that these players have, if your agent comes to you with that, fire that agent. That agent is not looking out for your best interest. And this isn't a Jerry Maguire trying to scoop up clients. I have no interest in that side of the football business. I prefer to just to be an armchair commentator from the comforts of my own house. But your agent is not doing you any favors unless he gets that in writing, whether that be a contract with a release clause in it, whether that be some sort of written agreement that isn't publicized. But these gentlemen agreements and these backroom handshakes, promises are worth fuck all. Absolutely zero. Because we saw what happened in the Gyökeres situation where things got messy, things got ugly. Gyökeres was skipping training, just like Isak skipping training. Didn't show up for preseason, just like Isak didn't show up for preseason. Gyökeres was getting fined. I don't know if Isak is getting fined, but I'd wager to believe that his wages are not being paid because he hasn't shown up for work. I know he came back, did a little medical, said he had a little issue, which is why he didn't play in one of the games. But then it came out, preseason games, but then it came out that Eddie Howe said his head was turned and that his mind was elsewhere and it wasn't in the best interest. So not a good look. Not a good look for Newcastle. Not a good look for Isak. Not a good look for Isak's agent. The only ones right now that are coming out of this in any positive light, I guess, is Liverpool. Even though Liverpool hasn't gotten their player, they're still in a little bit of predicament because if Newcastle stands strong, and we'll read Newcastle's statement in just a minute. If Newcastle stands strong, that means Liverpool is going into the season an attacker short, and there is 2 weeks left in the window. And look, we know Liverpool is very, very good when it comes to transfer dealings. We know that they're very solid in the market when it comes to valuations, getting deals, right? They pulled that McAllister release clause out of nowhere. No one even knew that he had a release clause. And yet, right after he wins the World Cup, the next transfer window available, he's making his way to Merseyside in like a £40 million move. First year there helps them win, or first or second year there, I can't remember. Might have been a second year. Helps them lead them to their second title, Premier League title, second title in 30 years overall. So we know Liverpool is very, very astute in the market. If Chelsea isn't the best when it comes to market and valuations and things like that, Liverpool's probably a top, and definitely for the English clubs. They might even gazump us when it comes to purchases. We might be better than them at sales, but they seem to get their valuations met and don't seem to overpay too much when it comes to players. They pay the big wages as well. They're a big historical club, so they can attract top talent like Florian Wirtz, like an Isak. So look, we know Liverpool's got a little bit of pull, despite all the jokes that Chelsea fans ran when we got Enzo and Caicedo over them and Lavia for a couple years, a couple windows and years back. So that's Isak's side of the story. But what we will do is we will go ahead and read Newcastle's story. And as you can see, this broke just about an hour ago, or a little over 2 hours ago now, 6:35. But the statement is, and it reads as following: We are disappointed to have been alerted to a social media post by Alexander Isak this evening. We are clear in response that Alex remains under contract and that no commitment that has ever been made by a club official that Alex can leave Newcastle United this summer. We want to keep our best players, but we also understand players have their own wishes, and we listen to their views. As explained to Alex and his representatives, we must always take into consideration the best interests of Newcastle United, the team, and our supporters in all decisions, and we have been clear that the conditions of a sale this summer have not transpired. We do not foresee these conditions being met. This is a proud football club with proud traditions, and we strive to retain our family feel. Alex remains part of our family and will be welcomed back when he is ready to rejoin his teammates. So Newcastle standing on business. They said, you know what? Fuck all that. We are not going to sell this player. We know that Newcastle in general does not need the money, right? We know that they are the richest. They have the richest owners in, if not in all of football, maybe excluding maybe the Saudi teams, but in European top flight football, definitely in the Premier League, the richest owners. Whether or not they need that money in order to reinvest back into the club because of PSR, and that stems from them just not having the brand appeal that a Chelsea has, that a United has, that a Liverpool, Arsenal, Spurs, and the traditional top six have. We know the quality on the field, on the pitch is good and has been going up. Eddie Howe's a good manager, but we just know that because of the way that the rules are set up, they can't spend freely like Chelsea did when we were taken over by Roman, or like City when City was taken over by the Sheik. So we know that there might be a little bit of, if we sell him, and this has been rumored in the past when they looked at the potential of selling a Bruno Guimaraes or Guimaraes, even an Anthony Gordon, of, there's always rumors about Newcastle was going to be forced to sell one of their stars in order to strengthen their squad, right? We know that they sold, who's the kid, the left-footed kid that they sold to Brighton that starts out on the right wing. But we know he was a promising talent. They sold him. We know they sold Elliot Anderson. So we know that they have to generate a little bit of money through sales in order to spend even more. But we also know that they don't really need the money. They're not a Brighton. They're not a Bournemouth where, selling a £100 million, they can't afford to not sell a £100 million player. Although you could say Brighton basically just told United F off with Baliba this year. Baliba's package probably would have been over 100. Whether or not that was an actual real bid, or maybe Ineos just did that to kind of gas the fan base a little bit. But we know, like I said, we know that the money isn't so much an issue. And of course, Newcastle United is going to do whatever they can to get the best deal possible. But that's regardless of any player. That could be for them selling Lewis Hall. That could be for them selling Kamara, not Kamara, but who did they just get? But any player for any club, you're always going to look out and try to get the best deal possible and the best return possible. But strong words by Newcastle. Very, very, very strong words. And words that would lend me to believe that they are happy with Isak just rotting on the bench. And I know, folks will say this is a World Cup year. Isak is not going to want to risk, not playing a full year of football. Nah, look, Isak could miss this entire year, through some unfortunate injury or something like that, right? Knock on wood. We don't hope that this happens at all. But he could miss that. And as long as he's back in time and healthy at the time of the World Cup, he's going to play in the World Cup, right? They haven't had two attackers like this for Sweden in a long time, in both Gyökeres and Isak, right? They had Zlatan for a long time, but mostly it was the Zlatan show carrying it. So from that standpoint, this isn't like a Mark Gahey where you're like, Mark Gahey can't afford to play third fiddle to Kanate and Van Dijk, or can't afford to sit out and not play and still make the England World Cup squad. So much different in that regard. But you've got this situation that has gotten to a point that I don't see any short-term solution. And if you would have asked me 4 or 5 hours ago, what do I ultimately think happens? I think I would have said, yeah, Isak ultimately becomes a Liverpool player. As of right now, I don't know. I don't know. This statement from Newcastle seems to point to them standing firm that he is not going anywhere. And yes, if he comes back, we will welcome him back. Whether or not the Toon Army and the Newcastle fans will welcome him back after his actions, that's remained to be seen, right? We know Isak's under contract for another 3 years until 2028. So from that standpoint, all the leverage, all the power, in my opinion, is held directly with Newcastle. Yes, Isak can sit out, and ultimately Newcastle won't gain anything out of it. Matter of fact, they'll miss it because they'll miss out on having their best player, their talisman, not play. And we saw how blunt their attack was this weekend when they drew 0-0 to Villa before they got sent down to, or had a man sent down and went down to 10 men. They're a team that's in the Champions League. They're a team that, with a couple of additions, could be looking to really, really cement their place in the top four. Not good enough yet to be a title contender, but definitely a mainstay in that top five. And 2 out of the last 3 years in the Champions League. Good young coach, pretty decent young foundation around them. A hell of a midfield in Tonali, Guimaraes, and Joe Wellington. We know that they've improved their center backs. So it's a team that, when you go to St. James's Park, even Chelsea, in our best of days, when we used to go to St. James's Park, Joey Barton and the men, Papa Cisse, Demba Ba back then, even before then, even with like Alan Shearer, like taking it way back, St. James's Park was long for everyone going up there because it was just a huge atmosphere, huge stadium, raucous supporters. They love their football up there in the Northeast, as you can tell, which is part of the reason why you've seen some of their fans react the way they do, is because they do love their club. They do support their club, and they know that their club is on the cusp of entering into what could be their golden era in this new generation. And definitely, in the Premier League, right? Mike Ashley just fucked around with that club for so long and brought it down to the championship, secured terrible sponsorship deals, put the club into a huge financial situation. So we know, it throws a huge wrench into the Newcastle project, and everything nowadays is about projects. It's about selling players on your project. It's about selling potential managers on your project. It's probably even about selling sponsorships and business deals about your project and your things like that. So huge ramifications for Newcastle, ramifications for Liverpool as well, as I mentioned before, of them they're going to need to make some moves in the transfer market. Maybe they're going to need to keep hold on to a Chiesa. They just let Ben Doak go. That's one extra body. They've got the young kid Rio. Do you really, if you're going to compete in all competitions, do you really want your backup left winger to be a 17-year-old or a 16-year-old kid in Rio? Even though, as a Chelsea fan, we saw how good he was, and we were all disappointed that we let him go, or we let him get out of Cobham. But yeah, I mean, Liverpool's potentially left in a sticky situation where they're going to have to make a panic move, maybe at the bye, just like they did last year with Chiesa, like they did with Endo the year before that. So yeah, it's a bad situation all around. Definitely made me look at Isak in a different light. Coming into this summer and off the back of what he did last year, he has a reputation as like sort of this happy-go-lucky, this nice guy, is about his football, is pretty quiet. But all of that stuff, whether it's rightly or wrongly so, because again, we don't know which side of the story is true. But what that does is it does allow folks to make a decision and make up their opinion on a player like Isak, rightly so or wrongly so, of course, because we don't have access to all the information, and we don't personally know Isak, but it lets people paint him in a certain light, and that's not what you want to do as a player. You want to keep your image as positive and as squeaky clean as possible, but there are times where it's proven that if you put up a fuss, you get your exit, you get your move, you can dictate it, right? We know in football it's a little bit different than American sports, in the sense that in American sports, you can get traded, and unless you have a no trade clause, you automatically have to go. But in football, you've got to agree on a personal terms level with the player, and then you've got to agree a fee with the team that holds their rights and holds the player. So yeah, it's a tricky situation. It's an ugly situation. I'm 100% glad that Chelsea is not involved in this situation, even though there's potential ramifications for maybe Newcastle go after Nico Jackson if he goes there. But ultimately, there's still a lot to be played out in this situation. We've got about 2 weeks left of the transfer window, so I think we'll have 2 more match days to get through. So we know that the activity is going to speed up. We know that there's going to be some last minute loans. We know that this isn't the end of this situation. But we'll see how this one plays out. But make sure you guys hit that like. Make sure you hit that subscribe, turn those notifications on. And more importantly, make sure you let me know in the comments what you feel about this situation. Do you feel Newcastle's in the right to hold their ground and stand firm and say that he's our player? We're not letting him leave. Or do you think that there was some sort of backroom deal that Newcastle should honor and let Isak go? Either way, yeah, let me know in the comments. Let me know how you think this situation resolves. Do you think Isak stays as a Newcastle player? Do you think after the transfer window goes, he'll be wearing the Liverpool red? Let me know. But we will catch you at the next one. Peace.